Another very interesting area is the Chinese traditional companies are actually very weak incumbents that are really pushover for startups. There's no competition for startups. So take as an advantage in the US, Disney, Marvel. There's no way a startup can really compete with them. If you're, or if you're someone who's come up with the next Ant-Man, right? And you want to go publish that on your own, you got no choice because these traditional brands are so big, you got to go basically beg them and let them give you the terms to let them publish your Ant-Man through their traditional network and brand. But there is no Disney or Marvel in China. So in fact, in China, we invested in a company called Youyaoqi. I see we have some fans in the audience. And then there's, you know, A-Zhan, B-Zhan, and a lot of, which we almost invested in. There's Baozhou Manhua, which we invested in. Okay, I don't know if I should be proud. That's the first clap of my talk. But we're quite proud of the company, Baozhou Manhua. They do a great job. So these are emerging new brands that are quickly grabbing spaces because there's no Disney and Marvel. So someday one of these companies will become the Disney/Marvel of China. So now if you've got, so seriously, if you really have the Ant-Man equivalent for China, you know, you see a lot of new IP being created and very rapidly monetized in China because there's no Marvel and Disney standing in the way. So if you're actually a great comic writer, you could test your idea by using, let's say, Youyaoqi, see if people like it, by just drawing some comics. People like it, you create your IP, then you find partners who will build an online game, a movie, and TV series, animated series, and you make all your money in 3 years. There's no Marvel Entertainment standing in the way. So imagine, as another example, if you wrote the Harry Potter equivalent, right? It took decades before that got published and then became a movie. Now it could just take months before you figure out it's worth money. You're basically using the internet as a way to test if your clever creations are good enough. If they are, then you can iterate and license your IP for movies and online games. For example, one of our investments was we found this amazing husband and wife team on the Youyaoqi platform. They created many great content, such as 大师兄. And then they moved off to create another wonderful creation called 10万个冷笑话. So we said, can we fund you? And they said, what? We're just a content studio. We said, no. You want to streamline your process, you know, and then get it out in the online comics, in the movies, and so on, and we can help you. And they let us invest in them, and sure enough, each of their creations became much more monetizable. Every new creation became monetizable in 1, 2, or 3 years, not 15 or 10 years. So that's all thanks to not having some giant who is there standing in the way. Other big names, you know, Random House, Home Depot, are some other examples in the US that are really big, Costco. It's really hard for you to displace them because they're traditional companies that are somewhat internet savvy. But in China, almost all the traditional companies are very weak. In some spaces, there's no big brand. Like in the barber shop space we mentioned earlier. In the US, there's Supercuts, right? Maybe not the most amazing company, but somewhat of a brand. But in China, there's no Supercut standing in the way. So if you're an internet entrepreneur, the incumbents are quite weak. And if you're into auto services in the US, there's Jiffy Lube. In China, there's nothing like it. So the fact that there's lack of traditional brands, or if there are any traditional brands, some of them are trying to take massive profit and not delivering to the end user a transparent model. So here you can use the internet to disintermediate them. So here are some examples in the real estate network, in many other areas where that's creating unique opportunities. Another opportunity is that the government has a lot of policies. And these policies are rapidly implemented and very effectively, as contrasted with many other countries that are much slower to making such policies. So because these policies are very effective, if you actually watch CCTV, which we actually do. There's a reason to watch CCTV. You watch for the policy changes that could become business opportunities. So we used to joke a lot about it, but it's actually quite valuable. If you have knowledge that's even ahead of CCTV, that's even better. For example, when the one-child policy was removed, one of my friends, his startup in the babies.com company, the valuation doubled. So it gives you an idea that that they will have a dividend from this, right? When there's a drunken driving crackdown, the idea of designated driver service became a great idea, and Yidaijia became a nearly billion-dollar company because they saw the policy, the opportunity that the policy created. So the free trade zone in Shanghai, Shenzhen, and other areas allowed people to import automobiles. So we invested one such company that's bringing in, Land Rover and BMWs. That would, when you want to, when it used to be, when you want to buy such exotic cars, you could only have one choice. It's the China choice. Whatever the manufacturer designated for China, with one of its few import channel partners. And that channel partner, because it had a near monopoly, charged a ridiculous price and blamed it on customs tax and everything. So you end up paying for your Land Rover or your BMW maybe 2 to 3 times the price that one would pay in the US. Of course, it would be higher in China, but not 2 to 3 times. So once the free trade zone became possible, smart entrepreneurs said, well, I could import certain types of automobiles. And now when you want to buy a BMW, you could have a choice of an American, a Japanese, or a German version, and then have it modified to work in China, and only pay a small premium, not 2 to 3x higher. So whoever can look and interpret the policies and find business opportunities has a big advantage in China. And that's more so than many other countries. I gave the example already based on import automotive, but actually if you look historically what happened to the importing automobiles, in 2013 the government started a study that why are consumers not being asked unfair prices. Then, 1 year later, they opened 17 ports that really stopped the monopoly. And then in 2015, the policy became approved, and lots of startups are now at 100 million plus valuation doing this import. Very few countries can have the kind of effective implementation that exists in China. So those are the Chinese advantages. One could still argue that Silicon Valley still has the most innovative spirit. But I think the Chinese value creation is a really new thing that's never before in human history been seen. I'm not disputing here that Silicon Valley remains the most innovative, and most of the disruptive innovation may still come from the Silicon Valley. But I believe if the current ratio, that maybe 2/3 of the world's market capitalization in high tech, in our space of high tech, is US, and only 2/3 of the remaining 1/3 is Chinese. We believe that ratio will change significantly, not because Silicon Valley will be less innovative, not because China will be more innovative than Silicon Valley, but because the unique value creation cycle that I talked about, that I think the Chinese companies may see perhaps nearly half of this pie belonging to China within the next 5 years or so. So within that great environment, what's happening with early stage startup? So when we started in 2009, maybe I'll start by telling you a story. When we started in 2009, the entrepreneurs, there are very few experienced serial entrepreneurs. So we decided we were going to jump in and nurture and help them, give them all the help they can, because boy, they were inexperienced and have such a high likelihood of failure, and that's a pity because they're smart people. Let's go in and help them as much as we could. And I think we did okay, but in the last 6 years, the entire scene has dramatically changed from almost no serial entrepreneurs to now perhaps tens, if not hundreds of thousands of serial entrepreneurs. And these people have been there and done that. They don't need that much nurturing. And we started to realize the people who are most likely to succeed are those who are self-confident, who don't believe they need an incubator or someone to hold their hands. And they'll use your help. They'll come to you when they need your help. They don't need you to hover over them. These are self-confident people. And if these people have tried it once or twice, so they've become a serial entrepreneur, they're perhaps on their third company, that's probably the most likely to succeed type of companies. Whether their first two companies succeeded or failed, it doesn't matter because they've learned on the job. And these people have tremendous value in the marketplace, and now the entire investment ecosystem is kind of built around that. If you're a serial entrepreneur who has a proven track record and who's highly respected, who knows his space, you will demand 10 times more valuation than someone who's trying it the first time. So that's the kind of change that's happened in the landscape. It's completely different. So to give you a contrast, I believe in 2010, we had our first company that we invested in closed down because they failed in their original objectives. So I remember the entrepreneur was in my office, he was crying, and he said, Kai-Fu 老师, I will try to pay you back some way someday. And I told him that wasn't necessary. The game that we're playing is, the game rules are simple. We make 100 investments. We only expect 5 to 10 of them to really have great payoff. For the rest, it doesn't matter. So the 5 or 10 that will give us 20 to 200x return will make us will help our fund do very well and help make us and our LPs very happy. The remaining 90 to 95, it really doesn't matter. You're here to build your experience. So just go try again. So that's the message I gave him. And then earlier this year, we had another one of the companies we invest in ready to close down. So he came to my office. He said, Kai-Fu 老师, he says, I appreciate your help. We've got 2 months of cash left. We're going to do our best to come out of this alive. But if in 2 months we don't have a turnaround and don't have any investment, we will have to shut down. I said, I understand. He said, but I want to tell you, you've been good to us. So when we shut down, I will still give you an opportunity to invest me in again. And I said, yes, and I think he's coming back to us. So the game rules have changed, the mentality has changed, people have matured. In the US, the same thing perhaps has happened, but maybe over 30 years. But in China, 6 years, maybe 5 or 6 years, we've seen this amazing acceleration to the caliber and experience of the entrepreneurs.